So let me start with an example of a poset, because I think we're just getting comfortable with posets, right? So let me start with it. Does anybody want to discuss the problems that I had given yesterday, like small checks that I had given? If anyone has tried and they want to discuss if they were unsuccessful or something like that. Otherwise, if you're comfortable with it, then I can just move on. No? Okay. So then let's just move on. So yeah, so here we have, but please try them. If you have not tried them, then then you will not benefit from the class much. Okay, in the sense that you'll benefit more if you try them. Okay, so yet another example of posets. Okay, yet another example of a poset. So once again, I'm going to look at a collection of objects of a similar nature, and we are going to introduce a way to compare them. We've already seen yesterday, it was very useful in one of the problems on intervals. For those who are not there, maybe you can ask later. But yeah, so this is yet another example of a poset. Now, so if you're joining this for the first time, don't know what a poset is, don't worry. Let me just introduce the set. Okay, so we are going to consider this collection. Okay, so let us consider the collection of all partitions. This will again be very useful in summations and in many places we'll see. Consider the collection of all partitions of the set. So here you have the set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you consider all partitions. So let's call that set P like this. Okay, so this is again an example of a family of objects of a similar nature, and we'll try to put a notion of comparison there. Okay, so can anybody give some examples of partitions of this? So what do I mean by partition? Okay, obviously partition just means that you have this set and you can just group some elements. So you break it into 3 parts. Obviously we need to cover every element, and parts should not overlap because it's a partition, right? So for example, this that I've circled like this is one partition, so we can write that as, so partition would be, this would be 1, 2 is one part, and then 3 is another part, and then 4, 5 is another part. You see, this is one partition. Okay, so in this way there can be many partitions, and there are many interesting combinatorial questions and so on that can be asked, but I'll just write a few more. So example, you could look at one extreme, and this is also useful in the theory of integration. Obviously not like this partition of this set, but partition of intervals, but that's a little different. We'll see that. Sorry, tagged partition. Tagged in what sense? Okay, yeah, that is a narrow definition. Yeah, it is a narrow definition, but yeah, yeah, that's usually how it is done. But in fact, in the end, you have to show that no matter what how you tag it, the integration is the same. But yeah, that's right. That's slightly different, you could say. Yeah. But yeah, here it is just simple plain partitions. Okay, there's nothing really in this, and so on. There are many partitions. Yeah. Roughly speaking, how many partitions will be there? Any ideas? Why 32? No, why is that true? Just try to. That's right. That's for subsets. Ah, this is a part. This is very specific. So yeah, this is one partition and this is another partition and so on. So yeah, it's certainly not 32, but yeah, from what you have said, it's already clear that it will be less than 32. Okay. So yeah, how many partitions roughly? Just think about this. This is not something that we're interested in now, right now. Maybe in the enumerative combinatorics class we'll think, but just think about it. Note it down maybe if you want and you can think. Okay. Anyways, that's not what we're interested in. Okay. We want to compare two partitions. Okay. So what we want to do is introduce a notion. So we want to introduce the notion of comparing two different partitions. Okay. So generally this is denoted as, this is for example called pi1. This is one partition. Pi2, this is another partition. So remember, the order does not matter, right? If I replace this 4, 5 by 5, 4, it doesn't really matter, obviously. Yeah. So we would like to introduce the notion of comparing two different partitions, okay? Which formally speaking just means that you want to make this set of all partitions, you want to make this set into a partial order, okay? And it will be incredibly useful later on. So any ideas as to how we can compare two partitions? Let's just think. So for example, these two only, pi1 and pi2, on what basis would you call some partition bigger than the other and so on? Yeah. So how to compare? What should be the rule? Yeah. So you want a description. So any ideas why one would call one partition bigger than the other? Obviously, these are all partitions of the same set, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. No, there can be many answers, but any natural answer would do. Now you could obviously just write a relation and so on, but a natural way to compare two partitions. Number of groups. Okay. So you're saying that if some partition has more number of groups, then you will call that bigger. Okay. So let's think about it. So then we'll call pi I some partition and pi j. Okay. So you are saying that we will say that pi I is bigger than pi j or bigger than equal to pi j if number of parts. So this is the first obvious choice of comparison to predict, but we'll check if this is this makes sense or not. Let's see. Means this is actually an order. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, but there won't be 3 parts. That is, there can be any number of parts. You take the average. What do you mean by average? No, but mean of parts, what do you mean by that? They are not numbers. Yeah, this is just parts. Yeah. So number of parts in pi I is bigger than, can anybody quickly say if this is a, so number of parts in pi j? Okay, so you're saying that this is a partial order. Okay. So let us try to check. So first of all, we will check just for review. We want to check if this rule is reflexive. So remember, what have we done? We have taken the set of all partitions and we have introduced a rule in which we'll compare. Now, obviously, this rule must be reflexive, meaning that if you take the same partition, then it should be greater than or equal to the by this rule. So this is obviously true because they have the same number of parts, the same partition. So reflexivity is not a problem. Transitivity, I can just check that it is not a problem. Yes, because obviously, right, if you take pi I, because that's just the basis, these numbers are comparison, you're comparing numbers in the end, right? So number of something. So yeah, it will be transitive, just like yesterday's example was also similar. But the problem is that, so yeah, if you take this, and if you have this, and if you have this, then it just means that number of parts, please write these things. Yeah, number of parts in pi I is more than number of parts in pi j and more than number of parts in pi k. So that implies number of parts in pi I will be more than number of parts in pi k and so on. But is it anti-symmetric? Yeah. And if anyone is having difficulty understanding any of this, please tell me, because some of you have not attended the previous classes. So is this relation anti-symmetric? So this is a relation on the set of all partitions, where the relation is that pi I is bigger than pi j, or you can call this R relation, but we're using the symbol because that's what we wanted to mean. It is not anti-symmetric, right? Just so we don't want to prove, we just want an example, because that's enough, right? When you say something is not true, just give a counter example. So can anyone quickly give an example? But then it will be, yes. 1, 2, 3. So this is one part. 1, 2, 3 is one part. Okay. Yeah. So you can see that this is true and this is true because they have the same number of parts, but they are not obviously equal. They're not equal, obviously. They're different partitions. So it is not an anti-symmetric thing. So it's not so, because you see the reason why, so this would naturally come with maturity. I mean, you will naturally realize these things over time, but I'm just saying this small piece of insight is that, see, the partitions is a much more complicated thing. Numbers are not enough to capture it. Only one number is not, will never catch. Just like when you had complex numbers, then one number like the difference of the parts, real and imaginary parts, that would not capture, right? In the same way, there's just one information of number of parts is obviously not going to capture a partition, right? That means basically that for let's say number of parts being 3, you can get many partitions. So that just basically means that one number is not enough. Okay. So yeah, that does not work. Any other? Have the same sum? No, that will also not work. That will also not work. Yeah. So anything else? Anyone? Something more organic? Parts refinement. Those who have done a little bit of integration can use that as a motivation to give an example. Just as a motivation, we're not going to use any integration here, but that's one place where you would see partitions. So I will say this. So I will say, I'll just say a phrase and then I'll let you try to extrapolate because this is very important. See, this whole art here is to, given a set, introduce a useful order. Given a set, introduce a useful relation. Given a set, introduce a useful binary operation. This is really the art, right? After that, because given a problem, you may have to introduce that new decoration of an order or an operation or something, right? That is really the art. Okay, once you can get that way to find that, find a suitable relation, suitable order, then checking that it works and applying the theorem, those things are easy. those things are no big deal, right? This we saw yesterday. But just coming up with the right partition, that's why you're spending so much time on this, right? And so you get a sense of what kind of things will work in what situations roughly. And there's no theorem obviously here, but we are trying to, yeah, okay. That's the thing. This is a very important exercise in that way. So pi I greater than pi j, if, so I'm just using it as saying it as an indirect phrase. Now you guys can try to make it mathematical. This is the sense. So pi I is bigger than pi j if pi, yeah, if, but it doesn't matter. You can do that. If pi j refines pi. Obviously, this doesn't have any meaning. You guys have to put a meaning and tell me what this would be. When would you say that one partition refines another partition? So you have a partition and then you're talking about the refinement. So suppose there's a set and you partitioned it. And this refining is very, very useful. It is incredibly useful. Okay. Because basically it means you're adding more relations and something like that. So suppose this is pi 1. This is pi I. Just I'm saying this is set and you're partitioned. And obviously you can put numbers there, or you can, but numbers are not important here. They're just some elements that's important. But anyways, we can put some numbers. We can just say 1, 2, we can put a 3. We can take a bigger set. So we can put a 4 and a 6. We can put a 5 and a 7, 8, 9. Let's say 10. Let's say 10. So this is partition of one partition. Now, if I say that pi j refines pi I, what should that mean? So it basically means that you're breaking up the partition further, right? So pi j is, what does refining mean, right? You just break the stones further into smaller pieces and you create a refinement, right? That's what roughly it means, right? So pi j is formed, and it's another view of partitions which is incredibly useful. So pi j is formed from pi I by breaking some pieces further. Partition of a partition is a very good way to say, yes, right? By breaking some parts further, yeah. So pi j is a partition of pi I, you could say. That probably is a good way to say. So for example, you could take this pi I and you can add a few more lines where it's possible. Something like this maybe. Okay, and this becomes pi j. Okay. So, but formally speaking, how would you put it? Formally speaking, I'll just say that if alpha is a part in pi j, then alpha is contained. This is just translation of language, contained in some part of pi I, or it is some part of pi I, which is also contained in the statement that alpha is contained in some. So any part of pi j is a sub part of pi I. Okay. So I think it took us some time to come to this. I was thinking we'll do it more quickly. So that's why let me not do more on this, which I planned, but I'll just give the homework. Okay. Check that this is a partition. Check that this is an order. Check that this is an order. Please prove. Okay. You can just take an example of 10 elements or something, or for those who are very comfortable with induction and such, can just take n and try to do. Okay. Check that this is an order. Now you may think that what did we do? We just defined, but as I said, this is a very important art to be able to define orders. But these orders have very, very interesting properties. Okay, but I'm not doing them today because we want to keep a balance with other things. And so that, over time you're seeing examples one class after this, so that you get more comfortable with this. And when you're comfortable, then it will make sense to talk about the properties, interesting properties, and so on. Okay, so yes. Yes, yeah. So basically I'm saying that pi_j, so if you look at, so you see here, I'm removing these green lines, okay? I'm removing the green lines. And so you have the partition pi_i. Okay, so I have a partition pi_i. Now I will further create more boundaries. So adding more states in the country. Okay, like separating Bihar into Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand, something like that. Okay, so you're just adding more states, adding more lines. Okay, so you take pi_i, and if you take pi_i and you add more lines, add more parts, okay, then this new partition that is formed, we will say that this new partition refines the old partition. Okay, it has more parts. And what I've written here is just that pi_j is formed from pi_i by breaking some parts of pi_i. So you have pi_i and you're breaking. So when you break, then you fall down in the order. That is the order. Okay. And formally speaking, this is what it is. Alpha is a part in pi_j, meaning in the refinement, then it must have come from some part of pi_i. And so that's another way in which you can say. There are many ways to say this, and these different interpretations can be very useful. That's it. Please check that this is an order. Yes. For this particular, I do not think it is 2 raised to 4. Why do you think it is 2 raised to 4? So if you have one divider, okay, so you're using dividers, okay. So you're using a number of parts. No, but the problem with that is that if you just use dividers, then how will you get the partition 1,5? That is also partitions. I think that's deficiency in the kind of examples I gave. Might give you an impression, but you see a partition is like this. It could, you can see this, right? 757 is there and so on. So it's a more complicated. No, order in the partition does not matter. No, because if you take a subset, then that's not a partition, right? Because how is a subset of partition? Just a subset, right? Right. So but one thing that I did say was wrong. So let me come to this. Yeah, that is, yeah. So let's just compare subsets with partitions, okay? So if you take a subset, of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is this 1, 2, 3, 5? Say if you take 1, 3, 5, is this a partition? No, right? This is a subset. How is this a partition? Yeah? But from this subset, you can get a partition in a natural way. Is that right? You can take this, and obviously you can just take the complement. Yeah, so that is a flaw. That is a flaw, right? That is the mistake I had made, right? So what we are able to do is we are saying that given a subset, you see, given a subset, I'm creating a partition. Okay. So if I, and just ask yourself this question, if I give you two different subsets, and that's very clear, right? If you take a different subset like 1,5, then the partition this would give will be different. It cannot be same, right? It cannot match with the partition of that is given by this. Okay, so you can first of all, you see, and so this is 2, 3, 4. It gives this. So first of all, see if it's clear how I'm given a subset, I'm creating a partition in a natural, so I'm associating naturally to it. Okay. And two different subsets will always give two different partitions. Okay. So this means that number of partitions, in fact, this is where I was wrong. This is very bad. Okay. It's, I think, doubly exponential. It is something like e to the power x kind of thing. And in fact, it is, this is something related to the set of partitions, but I cannot say it now. Okay. That's surprising, but it is very much related. Yes. Sorry. Can you say it loudly? Solve what number of partitions? No, there is no formula. There is a generating function. There is a something called an exponential generating function. Even a generating function is not good for it, but then those are out of scope now. So let's not talk about it. But yeah, there is recurrences are useful for many purposes for studying the theory of partitions, but they do not give you any deeper insight much as far as my little knowledge goes. But now you may think, you see, to understand the set of all partitions is a huge set, right? To understand a set of all partitions, this order that we put right now, and there are other different kinds of orders that are put, something called majorization order and so on. The orders that are put, they help you to understand a set of partitions very nicely, because they partition the set of partitions into certain chains and anti-chains, and they have a certain symmetry. And so that makes a study of this huge rich set very easier. Okay, much more tractable, I should say, not easier. So basically this is bigger than the size of the, this is not the power set, remember, okay, set of all sets, all subsets. Okay, this is what we have proved, and this is already not a bad result, right? We have proved something. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Yeah. So is it okay if there are any questions, just ask, because different people have joined at different times. Okay. Now, having done this, let us go back to the yesterday's problem that we had posed, but we didn't solve. We solved one question we didn't. Yeah. So yesterday's problem. What was yesterday's problem? Given n square plus 1. Okay. Given n square plus 1 arbitrary natural numbers, we want to show that there exist either n plus 1 such that none divide the other. And I will not do examples today because I assume that you would have tried with examples already. I'm not expecting that you've done a proof, but at least examples. Okay. You should have tried 5 numbers and see this holds or not. Okay. Such that none divide the other, or n plus 1 such that it forms a chain of division, n plus 1 sum a1 a2 an plus 1 such that there's a chain of division such that a1 divides a2, a2 divides a3, and this. So this is again two very complementary type of statements. Okay, and either one of them will hold. This was the question. First, is the question clear? Okay. Now let's see. So I suppose some of you maybe have done it because it's very easy given what we have discussed earlier, but I'll also do it in a self-contained manner. This seems to have nothing to do with partial orders or anything. Okay. So just some language. Assume that the numbers are a1, a2, a3 till an square plus 1. Okay. And so here maybe I should just say I1, I2, I, because I don't not giving the impression that the first n plus 1 are like just some. And this you can understand n plus 1 so that none of them divide the other, like there is no divisibility happening. So like prime numbers, something like that, or 4, 6, 10, things of that kind. So how to get started? You can see this is also very similar to, I suppose, that theorem which all of us know, because that we discussed long time back, is given n square plus 1 numbers, there will be a chain of n plus 1 increasing or n plus 1 decreasing, which is foundational to getting started with analysis, right? Given an infinite sequence, it has an infinite monotonic subsequence. That is really the starting of existence of limits and so on. And this is a combinatorial version of that. And we did for n square plus 1 numbers. But now this is, well, it's slightly different. So you see, we somehow want to, instead of dividing, we would love if there was a less than, right? Or something like that. So with that in mind, how should we define the order? Now, this is very, 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 the most obvious order you can think on natural numbers, apart from the usual. Okay. How to, or what order to give? What partial order? And this is all that there is to this problem. Okay, once you know the theory we discussed a little bit. Okay, but I'll say the full thing in a slightly different way. What partial order to impose? You can see that these partial orders are not God-given things. Given a set, you can impose your own partial order so that you can talk about this, so that you can understand this set. Or basically, firstly, you can talk about this set in terms of something more familiar, and that can lead you to understanding of the set better. That's the kind of thing we do in maths. But then what is the order? That you have to say first before you can use the word chain, right? Is that right? I mean, unless you give an order, can't. So clearly, if you just use the usual order on natural numbers, that's no use here. Yeah, because that will just tell you that there is a sequence of the Erdos theorem we proved, right? There is a sequence of n plus 1 monotonic subsequence that will just give you that. But how is monotonic subsequence say anything about divisibility? Nothing much, right? We have prime numbers, they are monotonic, but they don't divide. Or also, so it's useless. See, it's divisibility. So just what was the other order we had put on the natural? Yes, absolutely. That's right. That's all that we have to do, right? I'll say the other way, but yeah, I'll say that A less than B, A less than equal to B or AIHA, if and only if A divides B. Okay, just you could probably do the other way also. That is also useful in a lot of places, but here this is good enough. Okay. Right. So this is a partial order, and certainly the usual order refines this order, right? Because the two things are less in this order, it's also less in that order. So that's a fine, I should not use the word refine, it's finer order, but that's not important for us. This, now what? So now A less than B, if and only if this happens, this is now, first of all, check that this is an order that we have checked, or that's very easy to check. Okay. But if you are writing this in a exam, Olympiad type exam or some entrance exam, you have to show that it is an order. They will not take it. But that's very easy. Now what? We had even seen examples. Yes, please say. Yes, so what will be the chains? Just divisibility. Yeah. So if you have A, B, C, D, E, okay, this is a chain, right? Means everything is related. This just means, it is just by the very definition, just means this. Okay. But more importantly, what will be an anti-chain? So anti-chain just means that set of, so anti-chain just means you take a subset in which no two elements are comparable. So anti-chain just means, because a partial order, so not everything is comparable. That's why we are looking for chains, and the other extreme thing is anti-chains. Anti-chain is just a subset where no two are comparable. It's just the opposite thing. Now, obviously, the anti-chain is, right? So, I mean, A, B, C, D, E. Now, this is, and this example is an anti-chain if none of them divide the other, right? That is just obvious. So basically, this gets replaced by either there is an n plus 1 size anti-chain, okay, or there is an n plus 1 size chain. Does everybody agree with this? Yeah. It is just now that this is all it is, right? We want to show that either there is an anti-chain of size n plus 1 or there is a chain of size n plus 1. Okay. But that's something that you have already proved, right? If you take, so let's just review this fact. If you take a partially ordered set, yeah, so let's just review that and maybe we'll try to prove that fact also. Yeah, so this will be clear to those who have not attended earlier once I say the next thing, okay? Where I will prove that if you have a big enough poset, then either there will be a chain, big chain, or there will be a big anti-chain. Let me state that more. So if a poset, partial order set, if a poset has, one minute, if a poset has size, any size, you just take size n, then the size of the largest chain, and today we can try to prove this result, times the size of the largest anti-chain. This will be at least 10. What does size of the chain mean? Basically, number of elements in the chain. Now, this is a completely obvious statement because if you suppose obvious, I mean intuitively, in the sense that it's only some formality is needed to prove it. Suppose there are these n things, okay? Then you can just draw this. It's all about drawing it, right? You take the minimal elements. So you take the elements which don't have anything less than them. First, you take the minimal elements. And then you take the elements that are just above this, okay? This we had seen, right? Then you take the elements that are just above this, and like this. Roughly speaking, you will get this. Not always you'll get such a nice picture, but you can, I mean, I'm not saying that it's a pyramid or anything, just that like this, okay? And so this is bigger. The one that just at the top is bigger. And like, I'll just write an example also. And these you have to join some of them and so on. That really depends. You cannot say anything in advance. But yeah. and so on, right? So what is the longest chain in this? You can see this is the longest chain. Oh God, I didn't join this. I have to join it with something. Let's join it with this, right? So then you have the longest chain like this. You see, this is like the length of the poset, right? And then you take the longest anti-chain, that's like the width of the poset. And so obviously, right, I mean, the length and the width product will obviously be more than the number of elements. If the picture looks like this. Okay, so it's a very believable statement. Let's draw this and for an example. We drew for one example or two examples. Let's draw it for third example, because soon this will be useful. We'll be looking at real numbers from the perspective of posets as well soon. Okay, the supremum property, we'll also see it for posets, and we'll prove it something there in a clean way, and then we'll apply it to real numbers. That existence of supremum means existence of infimum also. Some of you may know it, but we'll see a different way to look at it. Okay. So anyways, let's draw. So let us take the power set. This is, as I said in the first class, this is like the universal example of a poset. Every poset is in some sense sitting inside this poset up to after some renamings. Okay. So yeah, let's take the power set. Let's take the power set of a small set, because power set poset is already gets out of hand pretty quickly. So so then how would the poset look? And obviously the order is just containment. Okay. So containment order, that's obvious. Okay. So what would be right at the bottom in this, the empty set, right? So we want something which is not bigger than anything, obviously the empty set, right? And then what will be on the next level? Anyone? On the first level. So on the first level, we want some things which are bigger than the one at the level below, right? But not just that, it should be bigger than the things below, but there should be nothing in between. Okay. So obviously between 5 and 3, there is nothing. Between this set 5 and this set 3, there is nothing. 2 is not in between. 2 is not contained in 3. The set 2 is not contained in set 3. So 2 is not in between. Okay. So we have this. Okay. Now obviously you can understand what I'm doing. The next level. What should be the red arrows? You see this and this, because 1, 2 contains both of them, so it's bigger than both of them. So it's, yes, right. So something, maybe I should have drawn this here. Yeah. And so you can understand like this. Okay. And then there is 1, 2, 3 is right at the top. This is a very specific poset. It's a very, this poset is a lot like real numbers in some sense, you'll see, because it has what is known as supremums. We will describe them. And we will first see why we need them, then we'll describe them. So obviously then, so this is maximum element, which does not always exist. This is the minimum element. So this is the way you can draw a poset, right? And so you can see, you can look, you can have chains, and you have anti-chains, you have all sorts of things. Okay? You have these chains, and this is anti-chain, and then you have these chains. Yeah. So in this poset, if I go with n elements, just think, if I go with n elements, then can anyone tell me what is the longest length of the longest chain? N plus 1. Does everybody see that? It's correct. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's correct. Length of the longest chain is n plus 1, right? Because you could just start with 5, and then you can just add one element at a time. You can just add one element at a time. Okay, is this okay with everyone? Yeah, but before that I should say that there are 2 to the power n elements. I didn't say that in this poset. Okay, here is the interesting question that you can think. We'll not discuss this today. How many longest chains are there? How many chains of length? If you know it, don't answer it. I just think, and how many chains of length n plus 1 are there? So you can you can see that there is 1, there is another 1, 2, then there is another 1, 3, and you can just imagine how many are there. But how many are there in total? Again, you can note it down, or you can see this later. But yeah, this is not an important question for us now. But yeah, how many chains of that length are there? But what is the longest anti-chain? That is the real question. What is the largest, I should say, not longest. Longest is not the right word here, right? What is the largest anti-chain? I mean, see, this need not be put like this, right? In a elementary test, they will never put it like this. They will just say something else. Okay, not contained in the other, or blah blah blah. Okay, what is the largest anti-chain? Anyone? How big can you get? Like in this case, it is 3, right? How big a set you can create such that none of them are contained in the other? In that subset, yeah, in that subset that you give. For example, here this is one example. Only these 3, right? None of them are contained in the other. So the 3 is the answer here. But in general, for n, what should be the answer? Think. This is good question. Not hard. It is not hard. That is possible, but in this poset, in this poset of a power set, yeah, in general, if you just start with a set and you don't put any relation, then there is no answer, right? Yeah, so all this, like even this longest chain, this only applies to this case, in this nice case. Okay, in general, nothing can be said like that. In general, this can be said though, which is quite an amazing fact. If you just see this without a picture, it's quite amazing. Dichotomy. So if this is n, basically either this is square root of n or this is square root of n. At least one of them is more than square root. So what is the longest anti-chain? What is the largest anti-chain? So I do I know the answer? Do I know the answer? No, I was thinking that okay, let me think. Something like that. That's right. Something like that would work. Yeah. So please think about this, okay? And if you cannot get an answer just like that, just take cases. Take for 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then at least you see a pattern, right? Yeah, but it has to do with the binomial coefficients. That's right. Yes, but still to prove it, you'll have to do some work. Okay. Anyways, why I did this example is to we'll revisit this question later on. Okay, is to again show you that any poset can be drawn in this way that I have described. Okay. That I just wanted to show that any poset can be drawn in the way I have described. And then it is obvious that if you take the largest chain and largest anti-chain, roughly speaking, right, it's obvious, though we still need to prove it. So how can we prove it? So let's remove these things. So the question. Yes. It will be, I think it will be something like that. But then you have to show that you cannot get a larger anti-chain. Right? You have to still show. I mean, it's a maximal anti-chain, but you have to still rigorously show that you cannot get a larger. If you do some argument. Okay, so you're saying that all the subsets of size n by 2, they obviously are an anti-chain because they are all of the same size, so they can't be contained in the other. but then why can't you have a bigger one in some other smart way? So you have to rule that out, right? So you have to do some work there. So you can sit with, take examples first and then do. Anyways, so this is not, so what I was saying is, yes, so I was saying that this to prove this, you can, for those who are comfortable with, just you can try induction and try. But I want to see this in a much more profound way, which is obviously it's a good known, well-known phenomenon in graph theory. This is all basically graphs, but it's a special kinds of graphs. We'll see it later how. But yeah. So the way I want to see this problem as is like this. Maybe I should not remove. So what I'm saying is, if you take a poset, let's say like this, what we try to do is we want to, let's say, decompose. Let's put the abstract phrase first and then I'll define. We want to decompose the poset. So let me think, do I want to decompose it into chains or do I want to decompose it into, 1 second. Yeah, so let's say we decompose the poset into anti-chains. So this is something that we are interested in, let's say. What does it mean? It means that you want to take a poset and you want to partition it, but not any partition, not just take the set and start partitioning it left and right. No, we're just saying that you decompose or you partition the poset into anti-chains. So before I define that, I should draw some arrows. So let's say, for the sake of example, that we have something like this. Partially ordered sets are very deeply connected with graph theory, coloring in graph, Hamiltonian cycles, and so many combinatorics questions. But right now we are just getting familiar with things, and obviously these are the exercises and set relations, some of which we are doing. Some of them are more profound. Let's say this is the poset. Okay, so you can understand just from the picture what it is all about. By the way, this is called the Hasse diagram. Okay, we are not going into the theory of Hasse diagrams and so on, because that's not what we need now. But this is what is called a Hasse diagram. It's an extremely compact way of drawing things. Okay. Yeah, so what I want to do is I want to break the poset. I want to partition the poset into anti-chains. Okay, so the most natural way to do it is, let's say I pick this to be one part, and this is another anti-chain, right? This is just the most natural way to partition it. This, break it like this. You see, each part is an anti-chain. Everybody agrees, right? You see, inside each green band, there are no red arrows like this. There cannot be. That's the way I've drawn it. Or at least I declared that this. Yes. Okay. Right. So if I decompose the poset into into anti-chains, okay, then there can be many ways to do it. This I've kind of done. This you can kind of say is the best way to do it in some sense, right? Because there's a simple example in front of me, so I just drew some circles, some green bands. This is in some sense the best way to do it because I'm kind of using the minimum number of parts, right? I'm kind of taking the biggest anti-chains and just chopping them. But let's note some things. What is that? Let's see. So decompose the poset into anti-chains. Okay, how many anti-chains did we need? So do it in some way. let's put this very clearly. Okay, let's understand this matter. Do it. This is the way in which a lot of these kind of things come, inequalities come about. Do it in some way. Example, as on the left. Just pictorially, you go by what you see. Just on the left, just as example, right? How many anti-chains needed? In this particular one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, right? 6. We needed 6 anti-chains. Everybody agrees? Yeah. I tried to do this in using the smallest number of anti-chains, smallest number of parts. I needed 6 anti-chains. Okay. Now you see what is the largest, what is the length of the largest chain in this particular processor. Four, no, there is one. This is a chain, right? Six. Oh, no. Yeah, so largest anti-chain is 4. That's absolutely correct. Yeah, but the largest chain, this is not a coincidence. This is not a coincidence, okay? The size of the largest chain is also 6. Why did this happen? Anyone would like to reason, like say it through a reasoning? So even without knowing the poset, yes. Yes, that's right. Because and just to say it in a slightly different way, yes. So if you have 6 things in the chain, then you will need 6 anti-chains, right? Or just to say it in a different way, I mean, if you take any chain, then 2 elements of that chain cannot belong to the same anti-chain, right? If C is a chain, C is a chain, A1, A2, let's say AK, right? Then each AI needs a unique anti-chain. He will not accommodate two of these AIs will not accommodate themselves in the same anti-chain. That is by definition. Is it okay with everyone? This is a very simple thing, but this will turn out to be so many things come out of, right? So yeah, you see. So now, so in general, what can we say is that the length of the largest anti-chain, largest chain, length of the largest chain. So we cannot yet say equal, but we can say that it can never be bigger. So it has to be less than or equal to number of anti-chains, number of parts needed to decompose the poset. And this is again a general reasoning business. This is a general thing about general posets, arbitrary posets. I'm not saying that this is equal. No, all I'm saying is that you take your poset, you break it into anti-chains, number of anti-chains you create, you cannot find a chain bigger than that length. And equality may not hold. In this case, equality is holding because I don't know, it happened, but at least less than business is clear that it cannot be more. This length of the chain cannot be more. So for example, if I break it like this in a, you could say a stupid way, then how many anti-chains I needed? 7 anti-chains, but length of the largest chain obviously will not increase. It is the same as 6. Okay, but this is one side inequality we are getting at least. So this is what is somewhat what is called a min-max phenomena. Now, there are dozens of theorems that follow the same phenomena, but probably you are seeing the first one now. And so what is the theorem? What should the theorem be then? How do we get equality? So that obviously, let's forget about the word theorem. What should we do to get equality here? Because see, this is like you decompose. So there are many possibilities here. What decomposition should I take so that I have the best possibility of getting an equality? I should obviously take minimum decomposition, right? I should say decompose the poset into minimum number of chains, minimum number of anti-chains, sorry, right? I'll say decompose my poset into minimum number of anti-chains. Then the claim, and this is not obvious, okay? It's not, I don't think it is obvious, okay? But I have not thought much about it. It can be maybe, but yeah. But, and the main thing is, this is the key. And so whenever you see this kind of relation, or whenever, I should not say see, whenever you discover this kind of relation, so you're taking an object and you started with chains and anti-chains, which were useful in problems. So then breaking it, so then using, so anti-chains, the chains are useful. So then what we are doing is we are using anti-chains to break our complicated object. And so the most obvious way is to decompose. So when you decompose, then the anti-chain and chain have this relation. Then the natural question is to ask, when can I make this equality? And so naturally, you would take, the best bet is to take the, right? So for equality, the best bet is to take, because if their equality does not hold, then it will never hold, is to take minimum, is to take decomposition with minimum number of anti-chain, decomposition into minimum. This is your best bet. And then what will you do? You'll take some examples and you will see that always equality is holding, and you'll make your conjecture. Now it's just a matter of proving it. You can check your conjecture. You can draw many posets. You can take some natural posets also, and you can check this conjecture easily. You can just, like we did here, and we saw it was equal. And so the claim is that yes, it is always equal. And obviously, it still needs a proof. It's not that there can be some very complicated counterexample. Okay, but yeah. So the claim is that yes, this is a good theory. It's the obvious necessary condition is also sufficient. It's like what is called a Tonkes again. It's the obvious necessary condition is sufficient. It's a phenomena that if you open a graph theory book, you'll find this written at least 20-30 times in different from cover to cover, different places. That's how pervasive this is. Okay, so this phenomena, this is what this is happening. This is because this is the obvious necessary condition is to break it into minimum number of cases, and it is also sufficient. Okay, necessary conditions is how we start the things, right? Because necessary conditions are easy to get by assuming something exists, and then you add them slowly. And so at some point, the tipping point, you get that it becomes sufficient. Okay, so when you break it into minimum number of anti-chains, and yeah, so the claim is that equality holds when the decomposition is minimum. So it just means that size of the largest chain, equals number of anti-chains needed in minimum decomposition. Now we will not prove this today, okay? But can you see how this implies this in a rigorous way? This is a much more profound statement, remember. It's a min-max kind of statement. The maximum of some set, the set of all chains, the maximum of that set is minimum of some other set, which is a set of all decompositions. So it's, so there is some family of objects here, and they kind of touch each other. Yeah, the minimum of one family is the maximum of the other. So now I would like to just, if someone can, it is not supremum, it's much more simpler than that. It is just the minimum maximum, because it's all finite. So in that way. Yeah, anyways, can we, how can we prove this statement number one from this? By the way, this is also called Mirsky's theorem. Okay, this is equivalent to a lot of other theorems in graph theory, but for us it is Mirsky's theorem. This is called Mirsky's theorem. Yeah. So this largest chain. So can anybody do this now? How we can? Yeah, let's think. Yeah, let's take a few minutes and think about this. Also, for those, just if you want to review, just have a quick review, ask some questions. I'll just wait. Okay. Mm. Yes. Yes. Okay, we'll do that. Okay. So I'll do that after this. Yeah. Oh, okay. No, so okay, fine. So after this, maybe when the class is over, I'll discuss it with those who are interested now. Yeah. I'll give, then you can leave after that, and then I can just give her a hint or something. That's fine. Because sometimes someone may feel that we can't get started. So then we have to give some hints, and then, but it's really, this thing is very general. It's useful in all the places. I wanted to discuss other examples in connection with binary operation. That's another topic in NCERT and high school, right? Which is ignored, but then it just pops up. So binary operations and order, also very interesting topic. I'll just discuss some examples of that next time. Obviously, now the examples we'll discuss will get quicker and quicker because we are getting comfortable with this. But yeah, but let's someone prove this. So yeah, so what you are doing, so I'll remove this thing. Just think. So you're taking a poset and you're breaking it into antichains in the minimum way, like this here. Then the number of antichains actually equal to the longest chain. Now this theorem has been very useful for us. This largest chain times. 2 implies 1. We want to show how 2 will imply 1. Because 2 is a more finer statement. Right? 2 is a more finer statement. We want to see how 2 can imply 1. So we want to show that how this 2 can imply 1. Assume 2 and try to show that Or have I made a yeah, it is right. Okay, so you see, yeah, that's right, that's right. So you have to use the fact that it's a decomposition. So if you are decomposing your poset into anti-chains, let's say A0, A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, and so on. Okay, so then what is happening? These are the anti-chains, right? And it's decomposing the poset. So it means that the size. So you are not using the fact that it's a decomposition. So let's say you're decomposing your poset into K anti-chains. Okay, with everyone? K levels. Just think of it as K levels, right? Or K. That's right. Yeah, the total is N. Yeah. So this is N. I should, sorry, I'll change this. Is it okay? And this is for any decomposition, minimum, maximum, doesn't matter. Decomposition means this only, right? At least. Yeah. So yeah, that's whatever. Yeah. So these are the anti-chains, right? This A1 is some collection of elements which are not related. A2, another collection of elements. Among them, they are not related. And like this. And in this way, I'm decomposing my poset. And this is always possible. That's a different thing that's easy to see. You can just basically, if you just break it into points only, then every point is also an anti-chain. So obviously that's a rubbish decomposition, but it is a decomposition. This is also a decomposition, but useless. Okay. So we are obviously looking at this decomposition. Now, when you look at this decomposition, and let's say K is minimum, right? We are taking a decomposition, a minimum number of things are needed. Now, what can you say? Oh, 1 minute. Just think about it. I'll plug in the charger. Yes, right. So n, so if there are k items here, you just pick the largest anti-chain, right? Let a1 let a1 be the largest. Let a1 be the largest, right? Then obviously the LHS. So yeah, this is the way these inequalities come. They actually come from some more sophisticated equalities, and then you replace then small things are there, right? This happens in many places, right? So this is obviously less than. So if a1 is the largest, right, then this will be less than k times a1, and so that's bigger than n. Is it okay with everyone? All right. So these are the parts, size of the parts, and you're just replacing everything by a1. Then obviously this will become bigger. Now what? A1 is the largest. That's right. Yeah. K just equals the length of the largest chain. But I'm just wondering if we even needed this theorem or just a small, short, easier version was enough. So let us not assume that this is minimum for a second. Okay. Just for a second, just experimenting. Okay. Let's assume it is not the minimum. Let us just decompose it like this. Okay, I think I have over. This was not needed maybe, but let's just see. Okay. Let us just take your poset, decompose it into chains, A1, A2, so on. Take the largest one like this, right? So basically, I have decomposed into K antichains, right? So here, what I have done is N is decomposed into K antichains, right? What does it mean? It means no. So if I've decomposed into K antichains, yeah, but then I cannot say that the length of the this K. Yeah, I cannot say. In fact, it will come the other way, that K is bigger than length of the bigger than or equal to length of any chain. Is that right? That's what we already said, right? K is, yeah, but that is not strong enough for this, right? K is bigger than, that's why this is not such an easy theorem. K is bigger than the length of any chain, because again, any chain will need different elements. Any chain will, the elements of any chain will have to come from different these Ks. Okay, so its size cannot be more than K. Is that fine? So this will not be good enough. No. So we will need this minimum decomposition. The extremal kind of argument. If we take the minimum decomposition of this K is the length of the largest chain by this theorem. Number of antichains needed in the decomposition is K. So that is the largest chain. So then that's the largest chain. So, and that's the theorem. Largest chain, and A1 is the largest antichain. Well, A1 is not the largest antichain. A1 is the largest antichain in this decomposition. Okay, largest antichain in this decomposition, but the largest will be even larger. So there's no problem, or equal only. So that's fine. Is this? But I mean, if you replace this by largest in all antichains, then it's even better, right? So there's no problem. Okay, so this is a really useful statement, and it's a harder statement than this. We have already proved this. Okay. We will see this, try to prove this, if you will, if you can prove this again using induction or something. But this is a much more precise statement, and it's a theorem. Similarly, do this experiment, try to break a poset into, decompose a poset into chains. Any questions here before I move further? Okay, so if you need, I will upload this and you can view it later also, especially for those who have missed the previous two. If you want, I can share that also. That is if you need. Okay. Okay. So the point that I was trying to make is, yeah, do the same. So I started with taking the poset and decomposing it into chain, into anti-chains, right? So then you do the same thing, but you decompose a poset into chains, not into anti-chains, and then you make some conjectures and claims and see what you get. Okay, I will not say anything more. Okay, decompose a poset into chains and do the same as before. Do similar as before. Again, you will see something. Okay, so here we had seen the largest chain is minimum number of anti-chains. Here you will see maybe largest anti-chain is minimum number of chains needed. Okay, so that's a dual statement. Okay, and you will get a very, that's even a deeper statement, which is much more harder to prove actually than, yeah, this is really what you get is dual. So to state it, it is just a dual, you will see, because this chain is advantage, but the proof is much more difficult, that this is the proper theorem. Okay, yeah. Anyways, this is not needed now, but yeah, please do try this. Take an example and decompose it into chains and relate it with number, size of anti-chain, and decompose into minimum number of chains and make your conjecture and check and so on. We'll maybe discuss it at some later. Next class, we'll do more analysis. So yes, please say. Yes, you could say that. Yeah, that's right. Yes, yes, yeah. So if there is something that you are using from this, you have to prove it. But we have proved everything that we have said, right? You see, if you go back, these things they will say it in some. That's why the way I'm doing this, right? We are proving it, right? So that's why when you introduce a divisibility order, then you have to say, yeah, that this is a partial order. I'm introducing this partial order, and then you will say that this is a chain, this is an anti-chain, and this is this. And just say everything you need, right? And then this you can say that from the picture it is clear, or you can once you do a bit more induction or you have done, you'll see this is not hard to prove by induction. So you can say this. Okay, you can prove this. So yeah, you can prove these things. Yeah. But in an Olympiad, you could use this result. They will not really mind. But the order that you put and everything that you have to say, what is I'm putting this order, it is a partial order. You have to verify the conditions maybe. And yes, things like that. Not a big matter. Okay. Yeah, because your understanding is coming from the basics. Okay. And also, along the way, we have learned how to put order and how to predict something is order. Those are some small checks that can also come, right? They introduce relation and they ask you to check, and one, two parts, and the third part, they ask you to prove a theorem. They build to it. That's the kind of things that come. Okay, so let's just quickly end with this. So today we're going for 90 minutes. So we'll be saying that total order on complex numbers. Anyone has? Okay, those who are not interested in listening to this, who want to still think, they can leave. Otherwise, we'll try to do this. Okay. Total order on the complex numbers. So let's say that if you have one complex number, a1 plus ib1, and you have another complex number, a2 plus ib2, how do you compare them? Okay, so I will just do what is called a dictionary comparison, or a lexicographic, it's also called. Yes, 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 please say. Okay. Uh-huh. So you're saying this if I1 is greater than. Uh-huh. Or yes, absolutely, this will work. But you don't need to go to polar coordinates for this. You could have said the same thing here also. Ah, right. Yeah, yeah. But this is probably more geometric. Like you will first compare the radii. If the radii, if they're on the same line, then or something. Yeah. Yeah, maybe on the circle, you're moving outwards, and if they're on the same circle, then you look at the angle. That's a very lovely way to say, right? Yeah. So or theta one. Yeah, if this happens, then yeah. But yeah, let's just say it in this only. Okay, first. Okay, so it's basically very simple. So what you're basically doing is you're first taking the complex number with radius 0, then you're taking the complex number with, I mean, just the next radius. There is no next radius, but so you go to the next radius, and then you basically travel like this, right? And you travel, the numbers become bigger. Then for the circle outside, those numbers are bigger, and then you travel counterclockwise and it becomes even bigger. Yeah. So um, I didn't say it properly, right? Sorry. Yeah. Good. Um, yeah, I just wanted to give a motivation. Yeah, so we can say like this. So basically, this will be easier. So you look at two complex numbers like this, and then you like this. Now, if you think about it, it is very, very obvious. So what you said is very, very geometric. Okay. Look at these two complex numbers. First, you look at the radius. Okay. So first, you just draw the circle. Basically, it's moving circularly, spiraling outwards. And as you spiral outwards, move anti-clockwise, your numbers get bigger. That's how you're traversing and putting order. And so this, okay, so now if yeah, so this is the thing. So this one is bigger than this already because it's an outer circle. R1 is bigger than equal to R2. R1 is bigger than R2. Okay, so that's an easy decision. But if they are equal, if they are on the same circle, that is if they are equal, then you'll just look at the angles. Okay, and the one with the bigger angle will be called bigger. Okay, so the first preference is given to the units digit. In this case, the first preference is given to the radius. No, sorry. First preference is given to the largest place value, not the units digit. Right? When you're comparing a number, when you're comparing two numbers, how do? You first look at the largest digit place, right? If some is bigger, just call it bigger. That's exactly what I'm doing, right? Okay. So you first compare the radius. If the radius is bigger, then it's bigger. And if the radius is equal, then the second preference you move. This is how you look at, this is how you traverse in the dictionary also, right? Simple, just do the analogous thing here. I'm not going to say, do the analogous thing here. Okay, and check that it's a total order. It's obviously a total order because he has given a prescription to compare any two, right? And this will end up comparing any two. Simple, very simple. Yeah, that is also same thing. It's all the same, right? Yeah, but we can do something here only. Just you can say that if the x coordinate is bigger, so you will give preference to the x coordinate, and if the x coordinate is bigger, then you will say bigger, and if the x coordinates are same, then you say the y coordinate is bigger. Okay, these are all similar orders, isomorphic, something you could say, orders. So yes, right. Let's stop here. I think we already did some things. Yeah. So the next time, what I plan to do is, now that we know that monotonic sequences exist, okay, we will state the next time we will start with not partial orders too much. We will keep mixing them from time to time, but yeah, we'll see Bolzano-Weierstrass, the statement of the theorem, and then using this, we will see its implications. We will see that from here, we can say that every sequence has a subsequence that is good, okay, which has a limit. We will define what a limit and all that is properly. But then we will see that there is something in between that is needed. That is existence of supremum, that every set in some sense has a maximum. If it does not have a maximum, then its set of upper bounds have a minimum. That's the next best thing you can expect. And that is the real analytic content of the Bolzano-Weierstrass. So we'll see that. Then we will investigate supremums and infimums a little more closely. We'll see some properties. Then we will try to define those things for not just the total order that is the reals, but also for partial orders. And we will prove some things in a more cleaner way there and come back and apply it here also. So that's what we will do. That will probably take at least one class. And then we can, this monotonic sequence theory we can use to prove the Cauchy criteria and see some sequence problems and limits and so on. Okay. So, yeah, we'll go like, so wherever I find an opportunity to bring in partial orders, I will do it. Okay. Because really this theory is very underrated. Like if you open Rudin and all, they don't have much of it partial because it's not yet mixed well. Okay. And analysis people try to stay separate, but just use it. Just use the